pretty wild how much that man was creating and how much he was understanding. They were saying he was basically 500 years ahead of his time because he was creating this in 1888, right? So before even people were driving around in cars, he's creating engines where you're already turning on the car with your mind.
All right, welcome to another episode of New Age Human. I'm your host, John Estacio. We're going to have some awesome conversations today with Matt Roski. How's it going? Thank you for coming on today, man.
Happy to be here and happy to put out the information.
Yeah, I saw some of your information, some videos that you were being interviewed for on YouTube, and I was just like, we have to get him on this show. We have to talk about these things because this is right up the alley that I'm actually looking to talk about. And today we're going to talk about a little bit of where you're coming from, because I think it's going to be a very inspirational story of how you got into the industry of health, wellness, and talking about alternative sciences and hidden tech. But today we're going to talk about suppressed frequency tech, and we're going to see where that goes, right? But Matt, you have, like, I went to your site and it showed, you kind of just briefly went over, like, you had a history of health issues, and I think that's what started everything for you. So I'm curious, and I'm sure everybody else is curious, what's your story of coming into this world of just learning that there's much more to what's going on? Some things like lifestyle changes were needed to happen, and for you specifically, it was for health. So where did that start from you?
So it started when we had a lot of health issues back in the day. I had skin issues, I had acne, weight gain, allergies, I get tonsillitis. I mean, I had all kinds of health issues you can think of, just like every other person, whatever. So you go to the other person and everybody has the same thing. And when I would go to these professionals at the time, this was probably like about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, about that time, when I'd go to the professionals and ask, what I should do, I always kind of got this, in my opinion, this answer that didn't help, right? They were like, oh, you're just allergic to this, and you supposedly have this, and we're going to stick you with this, and then, it's just life. A lot of times they tell you it's just life. And then they tell me they want to do all these weird procedures, like to supposedly figure out what the problem is, that don't relate to the thing that I'm trying to address. So it made me have a lot of red flags. It started to really make me question a lot of things. Like, a lot of things don't make a lot of sense. And it's like, how does this relate to this? If I'm allergic to this, how does that? And then sometimes they'd have no answer. So then I was like, okay, so I came here and you kind of just tested some stuff out on me and gave it to me and saw if it worked. And I would always come back with the same reoccurring issues. I used to have problems with my ears. I had problems with my tonsils. I had allergies. I'd have sinuses. I'd have bloating. I'd be congested all the time. And I was like, okay, there's something obviously missing here that I'm not seeing. And it's not coming from talking to a professional, because the professional doesn't seem to be helping at all. And the problems got progressively worse. And one day, we started getting into learning about GMOs, and we watched the documentary GMOs Revealed. And that was, I feel like, the standing point that changed everything. It's a 22-hour documentary which just goes in depth about GMOs, glyphosate, chemicals, pesticides, the whole 9 yards of everything. And that kind of just sprung everything into a different direction, because I started realizing, this is starting with our health, what we're consuming, what we're drinking, what we're eating, what we're putting into our body, what we're doing to our terrain. All of these things are playing a vital role on our health. And as I started to change my diet, we started eating, organic and grass-fed, and understanding things about pasteurization, which is very toxic. All of these things that I was basically bringing into my body, as I started eliminating all of those and bringing in high-quality organic superfoods and natural foods and all of these things, everything that I had completely went away. And I was like, okay, so I had all these sinus issues. That was from fragrance. Anything scented was basically destroying my sinuses, because there's patents to basically destroy the sinus and basically turn off the sense of smell and taste. So I eliminated that. Then when we went all organic, I started eliminating all the pesticides, which were basically causing all the bloating and basically, blocking up the body. So that was another one. Then I started doing distilled water instead of the tap water, because the tap water is just loaded with who knows what at this point. I mean, they put everything in there. So started switching little things by little things. And then we got into things with mushrooms, superfoods, Shilajit, and all of these powerful superfoods that just are not talked about, right? Like we're so, we have a cookie cutter way of eating. It's a food pyramid that's, whatever, 3 servings of this, 12 servings of that, and 15 servings of this. When we don't talk about the nutritional
Mm-hmm.
value of anything. You could eat all the apples you want, but if the apples have been grown in soil that are loaded with pesticides, they're not going to give you any nutrients. So you're just eating nothing. You're eating lifeless food. So what basically started happening was we started realizing, or I started realizing that bringing in these nutrients and eliminating the toxins and changing my lifestyle in multiple different ways will elevate my health to the highest potential. And I started to realize, and that's why we started our company, was that we don't have to live in fear. There's solutions to everything. We do not have to live in fear, and that, we're always stuck this way, because anybody can reverse all the problems that they're having just by cleaning up their water, their diet, and then their house, and that's it. And we try to provide on Cultivate Elevate. I try to provide a solution to every single thing you can think of, but of all different things in which we face. Because what I started to realize is with all these professionals is that they weren't addressing the root cause. They weren't addressing my home. They weren't addressing my food, my water. They weren't even asking me what I was eating, and they were like, oh, just here, take this, and we'll stick you with this, and then we'll cut you with this. So I started realizing, well, this doesn't make a lot of sense, because when I leave here and, go to do what I've done for the next 23 hours, I might be just putting myself back in that same situation. And I started thinking, oh, well, maybe they go into that whole, it's genetic and blah, 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 to try to, push you into that. But it wasn't. It was just, I was consciously consuming toxins and putting toxins in my terrain, and all of a sudden I would have a reaction, or I would get an imbalance, and then I would have to keep coming back over and over again. But I was never addressing that root cause. So we started understanding that and just changing everything. And health, completely different. And brain function, digestion, energy, the whole thing, everything started changing very quickly. And I realized we're just malnourished. That's it. Like everybody's just suffering from a lot of malnourishment. And, we might not see it because you go to the grocery store and there's so much food, but that doesn't mean that that food has nutrients, because if it's not grown in high quality soil, and it has been taken care of, you might be buying something that's got nothing in it. And then you're missing those nutrients. So what we started doing was introducing different types of superfoods to bring back those nutrients so that we could feed each organ and each area. Because I realized that certain organs, certain parts of the body require certain foods. And even if you look at a carrot goes right for the eyes. And we need to be eating for our organs rather than just eating food, because if we're just eating food, we don't know what we're depleted in, and we don't know what we're missing. And a lot of the things in which we're depleted in are specifically the nutrients that are being stripped out of the foods. So
Yeah. And it's interesting how you bring it up, like eat for your organs instead of eat for, I guess, entertainment. And we are bombarded with commercials and just culture that surrounds it with entertainment, whether it's sitting down and, it's Taco Tuesday and, Pizza Friday, whatever. It has nothing to do with what you need. So it's interesting how you brought that up. And it's definitely, when you look like you did, when you look into solutions and you're trying to find answers, and you go that route, it's a different experience. It's a different story. So that's pretty cool. And it's interesting how you grew up and you had a lot of us have these challenges where we think it's normal because everybody else has it. And then if you're just like fed up and you have the cojones to just do something about it, or the curiosity or the boldness to go and say, no, this isn't right, and for you, it seems like the trigger to say something needs to change, like there are solutions out there, was that documentary. So that's pretty interesting. And I hope things like today, this conversation will spark people to just say, this is it. This is it. I've been just dealing with BS for the longest time, and I know it's wrong, but this conversation really sparked me to just do something, figure out a solution, figure out an alternative way to do stuff. So I appreciate that story, and I'm very curious to know a little bit more about those solutions, and we'll definitely go into that. Today, steering into frequency, and what so. I heard you talk about just hidden tech, frequency, and to connect the two, like you have this history of health and wellness, but what got you into researching like hidden frequency technology? Because that to the untrained eye or to the unknowing person, that it's not related, right? Technology and then health, like what's going on? How did you get into that? Like where did that start?
So that started with understanding. So I had a Akashic reading. This was
Mm,
a couple years ago, and before I did that, I was in the fitness world, and I saw a lot of frequency that people don't see. Right, when you see a person squat 1,000 pounds or deadlift 1,000 pounds in front of you or whatever else, there is a frequency or vibration or energy that is all around you that you cannot see, also known as ether. Right.
so you saw that?
So I saw all of that and I felt that energy, right? It's almost like you're
Wow.
synced up, like if your two people are synced to one. And I would watch people do crazy feats of strength and do all kinds of things, and it blew my mind. But I never understood what I was around, right? Like what was being crafted, what was being created, and it was energy, and energy is all around us. And basically, so as I moved to Arizona and started kind of going out hiking and doing all these things, I started understanding energy more. Arizona just drew me in. You know, as soon as I got here, I was like, this is where I need to be. There's a ton of energy here. And all of this like craving for energy continued, but it left the spirit, or I'm sorry, the physical realm and moved more towards, you know, the spiritual or the unseen realm, right?
Mm,
And so what happened was I did an Akashic reading with a lady, and I she told me to look into crop circles. And it was
mm.
interesting because when she told me about crop circles, I was like, I don't know what that's going to do, right? Like, I don't
Right.
understand what that's going to do for me.
Well,
It's a very
so
interesting. Go ahead.
sorry to interrupt, but for anybody that doesn't know, what is an akashic reading?
So, an Akashic reading is sitting down with somebody who would be known as a medium, and that person basically can connect into the ether or other realms, right? So, everything that's around us is energy, and they can connect into that to access past lives and things that maybe you were doing in a past life. And she basically told me a lot of stuff from my past and why she goes, this is why you have the personality that you do, and this is why, you know, you're out in nature and why you're connected and these things and whatever else. And I was like, oh wow, okay, you know, this kind of makes sense. I go, because you just kind of spit out my whole life without me knowing you. And it almost kind of blew my mind because I was like, you know, I've never met you before, and we're just talking on the telephone, and you pretty much described my whole growing up into adulthood. And
That's
I was,
freaky.
yeah, so I was like, okay, you know, there is relevance to this. You know, obviously there could be people out there just, you know, making up stories and whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, so she told me about the crop circles, and I decided to start looking at them. She goes, just go look at them, you'll figure out, you know, what it is. And I'm like, okay. So I go to this website on the UK, and they show all these crop circles and, you know, all these different, you know, symbols and things like that. And she's like, you know, you'll be able to figure it out. And I go, okay. So I started looking at them, and I'm like, you know, they kind of look like planets, and it kind of looks like solar alignment, and you know, whatever else. And it dawned on me one day after a lot of research and understanding, like pyramids, Wilhelm Reich, you know, the orgone, the whole everything related to ether, mesmer, blah blah blah. After I started studying that, I started going, these look like cymatics. These look like sounds and frequencies of which are being trying to be shown to us, almost like a language. You know, they're putting an
Mm,
input into the earth to show it to us. Now, if we see it, we do. If we don't, but what was fascinating about that was I was reading about a lady who would meditate in crop circles, and she would basically like ascend out of her body while she would meditate in these crop circles and almost access more information.
mm,
So there was this whole thing with Google where they, you know, debunked it. They always do. You know, anything that's true, they always debunk it. So
right.
they tried to debunk it and say it's all fake and whatever else. And I thought, okay, well now if they're saying it's fake, then it's like, okay, now I got to really research more into it. And so as I started doing that, I started looking into just Earth's energy and like pyramid energy and Les Brown, Wilhelm Reich, you know, uh, what's his face, George Lakhovsky, you know, all these people who were using energy to heal. And I started understanding, okay, there's much more to this, and people are all doing this, so we should be learning about this. You know, why isn't this information being taught? And when I
Right.
started studying, understanding Wilhelm Reich and all of his work and all of the technology in which he created, it was all basically told that his work, even though it was shown to work, he basically was disproven because the science said that it's not true. even though he showed all of it was true. So it started me it started me going on this journey of energy, understanding the earth, getting more connected to the earth, going out in nature, touching trees, like actually being connected into the earth. Then I got into dowsing rods and understanding dowsing,
Hmm.
how you can walk around with dowsing rods and find water and minerals and all these things. And everything just kind of, each book would lead to another book. That's kind of how it was. I would open up a book, and that book would have more information on like water or energy or frequency. And then I would look in the back of the book because they had different references, and it would just lead me back in time. And it was interesting because you look at like Mesmer, and he was healing people with magnets and frequency, and he was outcasted. Always the same theme is that
Yeah.
anybody who figures out this information, they're always outcasted, and they're always told they're crazy, even if they prove. And he, and for example, in France, was healing everybody with just basically using magnets and all this frequency. And during that time, they told him, "You got to get out. You can't be here. This is this voodoo, whatever, blah blah blah. They got to outcast you." So when I started understanding that all of these people have been doing this for such a long period of time, I started realizing that there's a lot of truth in this. Right? It's not just one person figured it out. You have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. You have people you don't even know their names, and so when I started understanding that, I'm like, okay, there's much more to this, and people need to be aware of the abilities that we possess, right? That our
Yeah.
body, our crystalline body possess, and that also that the technology that has been suppressed. I mean, if we go into like John Keeley was a guy who in the 1800s created a device where he can turn on the motor with his mind. He'd basically go up to a whiteboard, and he can basically draw a circle and a triangle, and he could turn on a motor using his mind. And that
Whoa.
was technology which was out in the 1800s. So now we see that today, right? You got Elon Musk and chips and all this weird stuff they want to put in your brain, but we already have the technology where we don't need any of that. It's just
And
been suppressed and not
I
allowed.
I love that. And I'm glad you went there because I'm not familiar with that. And I've been telling people that what is being, and you can chime in on this, transhumanism, right? Turning the person into a robot to enhance them. And I've been trying to tell people that we have the capability of doing all this on our own, and we don't need a large corporation to create the products for us to get there. And so, could you hone in on that experiment where, like, elaborate on that as in a comparison between what Elon's trying to do with the I forgot, it was Neuralink, and then what that guy was doing? Are you able to, I guess, simplify what's going on so people can at least see a different way, a better way that's not something being surgically put into your body?
Yes. So with John Keeley was an inventor of many different ether devices, such as motors, such as engines. I mean, you can look up all of his patents. It's pretty wild how much that man was creating and how much he was understanding. They were saying he was basically 500 years ahead of his time because he was creating this in 1888, right? So before even people were driving around in cars, he's creating engines where you're already turning on the car with your mind and being able to access it, right? That's using the ether. And that's the thing is we have that ability, just like what you said, we have the ability to have instinctive abilities to understand things. It's kind of like, if you two people are sitting in the room and they get the same thought, right? They start to get the same thought because they're on the same wavelength and the same frequency. So they don't need the technology. The technology, on the other hand, like you were just talking about with Elon Musk and all of this, is to dim down the ability for your abilities to be at their best. When you're exposed to radio frequencies and all of these different devices and whatever else, it actually dims the ability for your brain to function because a lot of it is impacting the crystals in the mind, which are basically what you're born with, so that you can
Mm-hmm.
do all this, right? And that's why if we look into like shamanism, druidism, if you even get into like the witches and all the other things, all of those people were outcasted because they had the skills and they didn't need the technology. They just needed Mother Earth and they just needed to be grounded and connected. And as we ground and connect ourselves into the earth, we can then pick up this information and connect ourselves more. But the more we are now disconnected and using technology that's basically doing everything for you, Well, that ability that you were born with, or that ability in which you had, is now turned off, right? Because now you're dependent on something he wants to put into your head for you to go do X, Y, and Z, which also comes with an off switch, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
put something and flip something in someone's mind, you can also turn off something in somebody's mind as well too. And the movie, I mean, if anybody wants to see it, you can look up the Belko experiment, and that movie
Whoa.
will show you everything of what, in my opinion, Elon Musk is all about. And that's just very simple. It's a very simple movie, and it's straight to the point. And it's basically where these people get chips in their head and they're working in an office building, and you can imagine the rest of it. But so with that, we don't need all of that to be connected. And if you look at how advanced societies used to be that were around, I mean, you look at things that were built and structures that are built that are just marvelous. You see
Mm-hmm.
this perfect crafting and these cuts and all of this, and you're sitting there thinking, how did you do this? If you were supposedly either on horse and wagon or very, caveman, primitive, whatever baloney you
Yeah.
said. You sit there and think, okay, somebody was very advanced that they took this boulder and moved it. And that's the thing is the people, as we go back into like that John Keeley and these and others, they understood frequency, they understood sound, and they understood levitation. Right? There are a
Mm-hmm.
lot of devices which came out which could levitate people as well, because once you understand the Earth's energy, you can levitate as well. It all goes hand in hand. But now instead, in 2023, I'll sell you a car that might fly, that might get like still 20 miles to the gallon, and then also has like a charge that only goes for like 2 hours. Instead of
Right.
giving you something that could be potentially unlimited, because if it's unlimited, you can't put a meter on it to make money.
Yeah. And I think of these things because there have been times in the past where there's like a solar flare and then all of our electricity goes out. And then what happens? And then it could happen again. And then where do we go? And I feel like it would take something like that for us to collectively consider um, these alternate, not, I don't like saying alternatives like, or how about original, like the better technologies, right? Like just universal technology, unlimited technology, uncapped. And my question to you is, I I'm trying to envision a future where we stop using electronics traditionally as we use now, and use more of the frequency based, the ether based, the sound based technologies. And I'm always trying to envision that future and what can I do to help build that, right? And another thing is, in just the ancient times with pyramids, the obelisks, have you dove into that where they were using electricity generated by a pyramid, and as in what people think is what is going on, and then at the same time when you go into the pyramids and you're in these dark tunnels with the hieroglyphs, there's no soot on the ceiling. So what were they using to light their path? Do you have anything to elaborate on that?
So if we go into that, you can look into materials like mercury, right? For example, mercury is always very toxic. That's what
Mm-hmm.
we've been told. But also, mercury can provide unlimited free energy. So if you look at a lot of these old ancient structures, they actually used to have mercury balls and brass on top of them, and those can actually gather energy or atmospheric energy. So same thing with pyramids. Pyramids, when you go into those and chant or put sounds into them, because a lot of the pyramid structures are the same as the old world structures that are actually all around, like even here in Scottsdale, like across the street. Literally, that's how close everything is. So you when you go into these and any sound or vibration has occurred in there, that sound and vibration starts to change the whole entire area. So when you go into the pyramid energy, it's fascinating because, I think personally, pyramids were these big sound generating vibration, beautiful energy machines, but they looked very different, right? They had either a gold and copper outcasting or quartz. There might have been quartz all over them. There's quartz underneath them. There's water underneath them, which runs
Mm-hmm.
and provides free energy too. But the thing is with all these sacred buildings, and as I got into pyramid energy and started understanding it, it's basically just creating different ways of your cells spinning, right? It's creating a different frequency. It's similar to when a person, let's say, takes mushrooms or uses any type of things like that. You're basically seeing at a different frequency. So when you enter these sacred buildings, same exact thing. Your cells are now resonating. Your water in your body is now structuring to whatever that may be, that harmony, that frequency that's in that pyramid or that building. And now when that starts to happen, your body and all of its processes begin to change. And then you might go through some experience, you might heal, you might go through an experience you've never experienced before, because now your body is resonating on a frequency that's in a different realm or a different spectrum instead of the traditional frequencies that we're always exposed to. And that's why they spend a lot of time putting up all this nonsense and all these towers and all this other stuff, is because they're trying to dim the frequency and dim the consciousness, which is awakening, and everything that's changing so fast, because they know, based on timelines and based on events, because they study all of those things, that when you start doing certain things, there's going to be changes that are going to occur, and they're going to stay forever. So same with us, like even having this conversation, a lot of the stuff that's coming out now is only going to come out faster and faster and faster, because the frequency in which we're all around now is all changing. It's just like, even if, for example, if you used to go, for example, to a certain store, you might not even be shopping there anymore. That's just because the way that your brain is now working, it might be completely different. And sometimes going into a building like that, for example, a pyramid or a mosque, a temple, a church, whatever sacred building it may be, you might have a different experience too, because it's now just restructured your whole body. And I had an experience at a building in which I was doing chanting in, which was an old world building, and it pretty much just kind of felt like I was leaving, like I was just floating, and I was just,
Wow.
just here, but I'm like everything at the same time. And that's what I feel we've been disconnected from, is because if me and you didn't even need this device to have a conversation, imagine that. That's the
Mm-hmm.
potential and the true potential that we have. But like I said, they work on dimming it and making up all kinds of false stories, and people are getting ropes and pulling it and all kinds of things. And it's like, no, it's not like that. They were very advanced, and they want to give us the opposite, to actually dim us down, to making us think that we're very, like, we can't do anything. And then we
Mm-hmm.
are dependent on all the nonsense in which they tell us.
It's interesting how you're saying a lot of what's available right now and what's being force fed to us is dimming us down. And I do like the terminology dimming down, because it forces you to think light, and light is energy. And you can kind of associate that with sound as well. But like, I can see us as energetic beings, which we are, and some people can see it, and then you can, or you get a piece of technology and you can look for yourself, and we're glowing, right? We emit energy, we are energy, and if we're dimming down, we're losing our potential. And then like you said, I say too, there's a two-way road. When you start to replace things, it can be turned off, or the software can go bad, right?
Yes. Yeah.
When you went into the dimming down, one thought kept coming to my mind, which is, what are some things that, let's say technology wise, because I know that as you help with your health, that brightens your energy because your systems are all systems go, so to speak. What about on the technology side? Have you dove into anything on the technology side that's available now that can help brighten our energy,
Hmm.
that you can think of?
The issue that lies, in my opinion, with anything that's on the technology side is that okay, I guess the easiest way to say is, we don't even understand the frequency of light and how much light plays a role, right? Just sunlight,
Yeah.
right? For example, just sunlight alone, and they spend a lot of money trying to get rid of the sun all the time. So, since we don't know that, it's very challenging to say that a piece of technology in which we have today can elevate our consciousness or our frequency. That's, I guess, the easiest way to say it. Because in all my research, and even the books Invisible Rainbow and all of the Zapping of
Great
America,
book.
and all these different books, I've realized that, and even Dr. John Ott's work with Health and Light, which is a phenomenal book, understanding light and radio frequencies and all of these things, all I've learned is that I can't seem to see anything that makes us better. I guess that's the best way to describe it. It can connect us. I can use this technology to connect. I can bring awareness. I can talk about a topic and things like that. But I haven't seen anything that can actually elevate us in the same potential as, for example, if me and you went out in nature and I started to draw different types of sacred circles and sacred geometry into the earth. We started chanting, going through a meditation, maybe started spinning, holding certain types of rocks, elements, holding, plants, things like that. That would take you to a whole nother level. And I guess that's the things I've seen. And on the technology wise, a lot of the technology that comes out, what it says it will do to make you better, like jumping on a trampoline or something. I don't know, whatever it may be or whatever, doesn't seem to make sense to me that that's going to make me better. And as I started getting into different types of way to heal the body and turn on pathways, right? Like really turn on the pathways, like getting connected to nature and really turning things back on, there's nothing that can replicate it. I guess that's the best way. And I realized because I could sell you a fancy device for $10,000 and it emits some whatever it may be, but it might not even be doing that. My mind might be putting myself into a placebo, making me believe that it's doing that, but actually it's just me. And I realize that we create our reality, we create everything, we do all of that. I mean, I could sit here and we can go out into, for example, nature, and we could actually change the weather, right? If you want to make it hot, cold, all of these things, our minds can do all of this. And as we sync up together, right, as our frequency syncs up with one another, we can then elevate areas, right? And that's what some work of Dr. John Ott was showing, that where people would basically they would go through these group meditations. And what would happen is they would all sync up and they'd be able to change the area for positive energy. Plants started growing faster, birds started coming around, all these beautiful
Wow.
things. And they could do it in a city too. They could go into a city and change the whole frequency of the city just based on the people getting together and gathering. And that's why, in my opinion, with all the technology that they attempt to roll out, nothing replaces us being connected or actually touching nature, because that is perfect, right? That works at the perfect frequency. Like when you meet your friend and you get together, you guys are paired up. But through technology, you don't always get that pairing, or it's missing something. Now, if we talk about John Keeley and his work, then that's a different story, because he was working on the ether spectrum, which is always discredited because of Albert Einstein and all the other people who are paid, to discredit it. But, he was working with that, and that technology could have been very beneficial to us. And that's why a lot of that information and his technology was all suppressed and removed from society, because it could allow, like you just said, us to uplift each other. But instead, we're staying in the same spectrum. And the biggest thing with the technology, and I guess this is where I go on the last point with it, is that it's always using electricity. And
Mm.
what'd you say in the beginning? If we lose the electricity, how do we use anything? And
Hmm.
that's my issue. I don't want things that have to be plugged in. You can use things like magnets and different things with copper and all of the stuff to utilize the magnetism of the earth, which is free. That's what we should be honing in on, not something that I have to plug in or I have to like put my phone on to do something. I don't know, just whatever. It doesn't make any sense, because now I'm still using the same thing in which I'm trying to not use to try to elevate myself to a higher potential, when I should be using the earth's energy and everything that's around us, because it's always there. It's like it's always waiting. The earth is waiting for you just to be connected to it. It's sitting there like it's always there. So I guess that's how I kind of see it. And I haven't seen many people who've been able to bring things to, you know, the general world, because a lot of it is suppressed because of the 1951, Invention Act, that basically suppressed a lot of information in which we're talking about today.
Mm, yeah. So it's like it's interesting and it's intriguing to learn about these things, but yet frustrating to know that there's something like that kind of blocking it, and it's like a huge hill to climb over. I know that there is something that you had mentioned before this call, which was electroculture, and that is something that you can use, like you said, the world and the Earth's energy to enhance your farming. And I know nowadays a lot of people are trying to grow some type of garden, whether in their backyard, if you're downtown in your patio, could you go over maybe briefly, maybe an intro to electroculture? Because I think people will appreciate that, especially if they're trying to grow their own food. When eggs right now are what, $10 a dozen?
Yep. So electroculture is basically harnessing the Earth's energy, and this is a simple, free way to harness the Earth's energy and also harmonize the Earth at the same time, right? Because we want to take care of Mother Earth as well. We don't want to just spray it with pesticides and chemicals and then expect Mother Earth to provide you any food, right? Because that's not going to happen. You're poisoning it with all types of chemicals. It's going to give you something in return, and it's not going to be good for your health. That's for sure. So electroculture can be a great solution to this. And basically what you're doing is you're enhancing the life force energy, the chi, the prana, the orgone, whichever word you would like to call it, in your area or your garden so that you can yield more food. Your crops can be more cold resistant. They can be heat resistant. They'll grow faster. They'll start, communicating with one another again. They'll start to bring back all of your bees, your pollinators, your birds, all of these things. And so what electroculture is you're basically taking, for example, very simple, you can do it yourself, and it's very, very easy to do, but you can take a piece of wood just like this, and you can wrap it with a piece of copper. You can even wrap it with brass as well, too, because that's copper and zinc. But you
Mm.
wrap that, and you put the antenna facing up into the sky, and then you take the other part of the copper, and you just place it into the soil, and you just put that by your plants, and the taller you make those antennas, the more energy you will gather. And the thing is like we talked about with this whole frequency thing, there's energy all around us. It's just up to us if we choose to harness it. So if we look at all these old sacred buildings, for example, they always have like a little steeple or a lightning rod on top of them or some sort of design, right? It's some sort of antenna. Those antennas can gather atmospheric energy, which is all around us and above us. So what you're doing is you're taking a stand with your garden and placing these antennas into your soil. And what you'll start to do is harness the Earth's energy. If you do anything with, for example, copper pyramids, because you can also do that shape as well too, you'll notice that your dogs and cats will start sitting by it or sitting underneath it. Because remember, animals can pick up on this spectrum and this frequency in which we
Yeah.
can't see. Same with birds and same with bees, right? They pick up on all the vortexes and all the ley lines, and they will start to come around. The other thing you'll start to notice is that you'll start to have less insects or pests, right? Because pests or insects only come around to eat your plants when the soil and the plant is not healthy. Nature comes in to try to clean it up. It's basically that's what happens. They come in, they're like, this is all poison and toxin. We got to get rid of it because we don't want it to continue to make things worse. So with electroculture, what you're doing is you're just harmonizing the area so that you can yield more food, not use pesticides, not use chemicals, not use any type of toxins, and you can boost your crop yields pretty much through the roof. And I've seen so many gardens now just go crazy. Even my moringa plant, when I was growing my moringa plant, my original pod that a moringa pod is about 6 inches. My moringa pods were 14 inches and 22 inches long. And that's just a moringa plant on a balcony, not even connected into earth, nothing, just very simple with one antenna. That was it. I didn't do anything else. I just watered it, and that's the thing. And I've seen so many people's gardens just go crazy this year, and even 2023 will be even more. And it's just simple things because what I've realized is they're putting so much iron into the soil. Iron, iron, iron. And we have this whole thing about iron. And the Iron Age, in my opinion, deadened our connective consciousness to the earth, right? Because
Interesting.
iron can block the body, iron can block up the body, iron can block up the plants. Iron causes, drought-like conditions in the soil. It deadens it. It makes you have to pour more water, which, right, we're trying to save things. We should be pouring less water. Using copper, on the other hand, it's the opposite. And Victor Schauberger was big in this because he basically understood that if you use copper gardening tools versus iron gardening tools, you'll yield more, have more food, things will grow faster, and you won't impact the Earth's energy as the same as when you use iron. When you use that iron, now you have to work harder. It's got to take 2 times more water, and then also not only that, it's gunking up everything so that you don't yield as much. Which guess what happens when you don't yield as much? You're always dependent on the grocery store. And like you just said, with the $10, eggs, for example, if everybody had a chicken, that would all be resolved overnight. But just in general, the dependency that comes on the grocery store because you can't grow your own
Mm-hmm.
makes that business always making money. Who bought Whole Foods? Jeff Bezos. Why did he buy it? Because you're always people got to get food. But if we start taking back our power and utilizing electroculture, we can then grow our own food. We can all be self-sufficient. And here's just a simple example. Imagine just, for example, the average apartment complex, and let's say it's just 10 units, right? And even it's just balcony gardens. Those 10 units and those 10 balconies could pretty much supply probably most of that complex for at least a couple times a week or whatever it may be of whatever greens that they're trying to get for whatever it may be. One person can do this, one person can do that.
Right.
And you could have an abundance with just 10 units. Now, most apartment complexes are you go 100 to 1,000 to whatever it may be. So, why aren't we using this and why aren't we growing all this food unless like we're trying to redirect all of the money to Monsanto and all the toxin chemicals that are sold at Home Depot, Ace Hardware, Lowe's and all of that. And I realized when I started understanding electroculture, I started understanding that a lot of people who brought this to light back in the day, Justin Christo Flo, Victor Schauberger, George Lakhovsky, all those three people, they only could speak in front of one person. And that's why the information could never be brought to light or their books were burned. When I started looking into all of this, these people's books they were gone. There might be
Wow.
a digital copy, but there's no more a physical copy of certain things. And that's where, when we go back in time about frequency and technology, in which we were talking about in the beginning, the burning of Alexandria and all of the great places which had books, they removed all of this so that people can be dependent on all the systems, whether it's energy, food, water, and frequency, right?
A
Because even if
reset.
you want to heal, you have to go through a special clause and have a special thing in order to even create a healing device. So we look at all of this and understand that it's all been infiltrated and that a lot of this information has all been suppressed for the reasons of profit. And that's it.
Yeah. I like how you brought that home because you follow the money and that's where you get a lot of your answers. And I feel that a lot of people can agree on the profit being one of the biggest reasons and the biggest incentives for companies to go along with this. You can totally tell somebody, do you want to feed your family or do you want to keep telling people about stuff that they can do for free and they don't need you anymore? And I've been in a situation where I've seen better alternatives to something that I was selling and I was just like, oh man, like I am in such a contradiction right now and I don't want to downplay something that's better and it's frustrating. And I know that when you are tied down to, let's say, one product and you're just kind of like that loyal person, you're just frustrated and you are just tied down to that one solution. I also like how you said, and a lot of it is with empowering people to be independent. And I really feel I love electroculture and what it's doing because it's funny because when you have, I've had conversations with a friend of mine and he doesn't like plants in the house because it brings in all these bugs and flies and stuff. So would you say that a compromise with that couple, his wife could put a rod, like when you do dry cleaning, don't you get like these copper clothing hangers? It's made out of copper, right? I don't know.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
then
You're
you
right.
can take
Yeah,
that and get like a leftover chopstick from that last night's Chinese food, wrap that up, throw it in the little pot, and then let's see if the bugs appear. Have one with it, one without it, and see if the bugs go that way, like as a little experiment. And I think stuff like this can solve family feuds, can solve the food crisis. I mean, if you're telling me that a lot of what's going on right now, which is people are worried about limitations in like crop feed or just the soil, I think you have to do something that, like, again, traditionally you have to do something to the soil. You have to put nitrates in it. You have to, there's this whole complex and expensive process that you have to do with soil. And what you're saying is you can not have to do any of that because it just make it healthy, give it energy, and it'll do it. It'll heal itself, so to speak, right?
pretty
And I
much
think
you're
that's
bringing
amazing.
back the electrical conductivity of the earth, right? It's always
Yeah.
resonating. It's like when you walk into a certain place and you're like, oh, I can feel it here. Like you can feel the energy. You're pretty much turning that on. And then you don't need to use pesticides and chemicals and fertilizers and all of that as well too, because all of those are byproducts of the chemical companies who are trying to make a profit, right? They tell you, if they told you this every 10 years that you need pesticides to grow, after about the fourth generation is going to believe they need pesticides to grow. But they don't understand that the first generation never used any of that because they've already forgotten that because it's been so programmed and ingrained into the mind. So, I look at it that way and understand that we could be just healing the soil very simply. You can use, for example, electroculture, and you can also use volcanic clay and basalt, which is loaded with
Mm.
quartz. And that quartz will have a piezoelectric effect to produce more energy. So two simple things. It does not take much. And you can put that all over, put an antenna, and there you go, and just watch it work. And like I said, I get so many messages of people's gardens going crazy, and it's like we didn't do much. We just put an antenna in there, and that was it. And it works all over the place because the Earth is a giant electrical, magnetic, beautiful device, right? It's a beautiful being.
Yeah.
It's breathing. It has a frequency. If you go into the Schumann resonance, 7.83 hertz or 7.84 hertz, whatever it may be. You look at that and understand that everything is a frequency. Then if I start to put, for example, these antennas in my soil, well, I'm just boosting the frequency for that area. And it's interesting because even related to the birds and the bees, right? Birds pick up on magnetic ley lines so that they can travel. They go in a vortex. They create a vortex before they fly. Their wings
Wow.
also produce a vortex. Their tail produces a vortex. All of that vortex energy allows them to pick up on the ley lines so they know exactly where to go. And when birds are no longer around in your soil, your plants do not basically open up and basically go through this process in which they hear birds chirping and they can't absorb nutrients as well. So when you start doing electroculture, you start having all kinds of birds. I got birds sitting on my balcony. I got sparrows and hummingbirds and I don't know, doves, any I don't know, whatever bird you could think of, it comes on the balcony. But anyway, so you start seeing that, and then you start seeing bees, right? If people are having trouble with bees, because bees are unfortunately getting bombarded with frequencies and all of this toxic stuff, and really trying to struggle to function. And that's why Walmart has a patent on robotic bees, right? Because they
No
know that
way.
if that ever happens, they got the solution. Because they sold you the poison, which was messing them up. Now they got the solution that they're going to sell you as well. But so when you start doing electroculture, you'll start notice you got bees. I got bees all the time. I can go outside and just the bees will come sit on my hand, and my plants are always being pollinated. Versus maybe somebody else's plants who is not taking care of their soil and it's not resonating that beautiful frequency. The bees aren't going to come around because they're starting to pick up. We're destroying things and we're messing them up with these practices which have been programmed into our mind. We need to start fixing that so that they will start coming around and that their GPS is no longer getting messed up too. Because bees work on a frequency of, you want to laugh, 28 kilohertz, which is the same frequency of the pyramid. And there's your
No.
levitation, right? Because remember, bees are levitating, they're not flying. So same
I
frequency
I heard
as
that.
above the pyramid is the same frequency as the bird. So the question is, oh, I'm sorry, as the bee. So the question is how did they know that? Unless they were connected or in tune with the earth and with the frequency of everything to understand certain frequencies and certain sound effects and certain this emit
Mm-hmm.
certain things. And to take it a step further with that, you can look into Dan Carlson's work. He created a boombox in which you could place next to plants and it would play bird chirping sounds and his plants would grow like crazy and he'd spray them with a little bit of fermented wine and then play these sounds and the plants just went wild. And he's like,
Wow.
the only change that occurred was the bird's frequency, which was the bird chirping the whole entire time, and it made their plants go like crazy. And he didn't have to do anything different. And that's the thing. It's all in harmony. The earth is in perfect harmony. It's just when we cause this imbalance that the earth has to work 2 times harder, or the plants have to work 2 times harder to try to grow. And if they do all this weird stuff with, for example, the weather and these towers and all of this, they're creating an imbalance. But the cool thing is, I've learned with electroculture that even though all of that is going on and all of this nonsense that we face is going on, the plants still grow and the plants still bloom and the fruit still comes. And people I've seen, which was really mind blowing, a lady sent me a picture, which it relates to something that happened with me. But she basically made a wood antenna with copper, placed it into the soil, and that antenna started growing leaves. So now she's like, what, you know, I was sitting there going, okay, so then are trees really not here or are they hibernating? Is there something we're missing, right? Because if that,
Was it? It was a branch,
it was a branch, yes,
like a dead, stale branch.
pretty much. Because sometimes people have the trouble finding wood. So I just say, you know, go out in your backyard and find the wood that's already resonating in your backyard, right? Because it's going to resonate better with you. So she just took a branch, wrapped it with copper, put it in, and she sends me a picture, and she's like, "There's leaves growing on it now," and it's like, so it has no roots and it has nothing, but it's still growing. And I had that happen with a moringa tree where I wrapped some copper around the bulb of the tree, the roots, and the tree started sprouting leaves again after 6 months. So I realize things are not in the state in which we've been told, right? Then they come in, they chop it all down and butcher it with chainsaws and do all kinds of weird stuff to it. So it's like it might not even be gone. It just needs to be taken care of. And that's where, like, even Marcel Vogel and all of his work, he understood that we could talk to plants, we can
Mm.
communicate with plants, our brain can sync with a plant to a point in which if you receive pain, let's say from 2,000 miles away, you get into an accident or you fall or whatever else, the plants that you're gardening will also receive pain. They pick up on that from 2,000 miles away. And they did EKG testing to see this. So that's how
Wow.
in sync we are with nature, even though the whole time is, like you just said, in the middle of this was technology, technology, connect you, put all these things in you, whatever. I don't need any of that. I'm already connected, you know, and that's how we have to start thinking. We have to trust our instinct and be connected to what's always around us because it will provide all the answers. And that's what Victor Schauberger originally said. If you go with nature, you support nature. If you go against it, it's going to destroy you. And that's it.
Ooh, I love that quote. It's a little scary. It reminds me of the movie The Happening. Are you familiar with the movie The Happening?
I don't think I've seen it. I'll have to check the trailer and check it out. Yeah.
Oh my God. I can't say anything. You have to see what's happening. It's directly associated with what you just said. So, that's crazy. I love how you brought that all together. And it's true. There's a lot of things that we don't know. We've been suppressed from, it's been suppressed from us, and we can always look at the past to understand where we're going in the future, or where we need to and where we got lost, especially looking at those pyramids, where they're placed, how tall they are, what are the dimensions, what's the sacred geometry that's working here. There's so much more to learn. But I do want to give you a chance. Well, first, I want to thank you for your time because we went over some really cool stuff. I hope everybody listening appreciated it because that was awesome. But I do want to, I know that you have an online shop. I know you're doing some things. You have some projects. I'm even curious, are you teaching electroculture in classes and things of that nature? So feel free to share where everybody can find you and any type of projects that you're working on.
So you can find us on cultivateelevate.com, and we have a blog called Electroculture for Beginners, and I try to put as much information as I can in that blog so that people can learn. And there's some videos, there's a FAQ, you know, so if you have questions, how do I do this, you know, how do I set it up and everything, it's all kind of right there. And then I pretty much just make a bunch of videos and put them up also on social media and Instagram and YouTube and wherever else, and just let them go do their thing because I feel people are just, like you said, taking the initiative. And once they start taking that, I mean, then they tell a friend. Like I have a buddy in Australia who's been giving antennas to people, and their gardens are going nuts. And he's like, I watched this guy on YouTube, and he told me to do this, so I did it. And then now his stuff is crazy, and he sends me updates all the time, you know, from Australia and his apples and his different fruits and like everything that he's growing. And it's like that's what we can be doing. You know, we need to bring awareness. And the thing is you got nothing to lose. You know, that's kind of how I see it. Like if your plants aren't doing well, your trees aren't doing well, you know, people have apple orchards and all these things. If they're not doing well, they just need some love and care, you know, because the love and care is going to make a big difference. So we have a lot of this information on our website, and then we also do stuff on our Instagram and then our Telegram at Cultivate Elevate, you know, where you guys can also join in. And we have a chat. You know, you can just come in and chat, and I like Telegram because people can just talk to each other and help each other as well, because that's what it should be. social media, Instagram, and all of these platforms used to be that. But now every single topic, no matter what it is, even if you talk about green smoothies, they're going to block you from talking and whatever else. So I've been really focused on going on other places and then also having a chat with you and then as many people as I can to bring this information out because, like I said, you have nothing to lose. You just have things that you can gain. And if one person can grow, more food, right? That one person, like my one friend for example, in Europe, they had to start just giving away their food to their friends and family because they have too much food. So that's how food shortages and crises try to push. It just takes a little bit of action and in my opinion, a food shortage of people growing food. So when we take back that and we go and then have that, and then we also don't need all the chemicals, right? Because this is a solution, in my opinion, to chemical farming. It doesn't make any sense that I'm going to take chemicals, spray it all over my food, it's going to grow, and then I'm going to eat it, right? That's like taking gasoline and
Makes no
pouring it on your
sense.
plants and saying like, oh, now it's healthy. What? I don't want to eat gasoline. Like it doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. So we really have to look at the things that we've been doing, and I like what you said about looking at the past as well, because there's a lot of information in the past which it just hasn't surfaced, but a lot of people were already doing really great things, and we have to rediscover that and go into that and look into these people and buy books, right? That's the other thing. Purchase books, because the issue that I notice, and it relates to the topic that you talked about 20 minutes ago about with technology, is sometimes you get a very skewed information or skewed amount of things coming into you. Versus in the book already had the truth, in my opinion. Now, there might be a little bit of like, oh, it's not true and whatever in the book, but for the most part, a lot of the truth is in the books. And that's what I started doing, was going into books. And then they'd end up missing, not coming to my house and whatever else, of course, per the usual. But it just really opened my eyes into different things. And like I said, I always want to provide solutions and not fear.
I love it. I love it. Thank you again for coming on. Um, I've been guilty for downloading a lot of audiobooks, and I think what I'm going to start continuing to do is buy some books, even though I have the audio, just so that I can kind of sift through it and bookmark, and it's kind of hard to do that all digitally. So yeah, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge and your extensive knowledge and all these books. You're dropping names left and right, which I love. I love, because you can either just say stuff because you heard about it, or you mention names of people. Someone can be like, okay, write that name down, note it, come back and really look into it a little bit more deeper. So I do appreciate that a lot. So once again, thank you for coming on. Everybody check out Matt's information, his business, Cultivate, Elevate, everything. It looks awesome. There's more to come, I know. And possibly coming back another time to talk about other subjects, because there's a lot to talk about, and we spoke about that briefly. But until then, everybody have a good one. Thanks, Matt.
Until next time.